Welcome to the Global Leadership Podcast, where leaders of all sorts come to grow and expand their influence in healthy and holistic ways. I'm your host, Whitney Putnam, and listen, it may not feel like it to you, but we are in the middle of what we call summit season. It just means we're getting so excited to get to host you and your teams at our leadership event where you get to come and get poured into. I was just having a conversation with a former podcast guest, and we were sitting down talking, and she said to me, Whitney, the summit is a ritual for me. It's a rhythm for me that I get to get away for a couple of days. I have these excellent speakers and experts in their field pour into me so that way I can go back to my team and pour out as well. That's exactly what we hope for you, that the summit becomes a couple of days that you can get the best leadership skills and thoughts so that you can come out on the other side in a way that you get to serve those that you lead. And listen, that means that we want you to get to know our 2025 global leadership speakers. And that's what we're doing in this bonus episode. You're going to get to know Stephanie Chung. Stephanie is energy. You sit with Stephanie and you learn from her for a little bit, and she is so much energy. She comes from the aviation industry, and she actually rose from a baggage handler to eventually making history as the first African-American and second female president of a major private aviation company. She's a top sales executive generating $1 billion in revenue annually, and currently she's serving as an author and speaker, and her book is titled Ally Leadership: How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. David and Stephanie have a very candid conversation about how to set up teams that are actually going to succeed in today's work environment. I know you heard that right. They're actually going to give insight about how to set up teams that are working well and successfully in today's work environment. She identifies for us that we are in a unique time in history for the workplace where 5 generations are working alongside each other. So that means boomers and zoomers actually learning how to talk with one another to create incredible outcomes. This is a great topic for any leader to jump into. We're also talking about legacy this month, and Stephanie tells really neat stories about how her dad's leadership shaped and formed her. This conversation is full of practical wisdom and gives really great insight for wherever you are in your leadership journey. So why don't we dive into our conversation with our CEO, David Ashcraft, and Stephanie Chung.
Well, hello, Stephanie. It's great to have you join us on the GLN podcast today.
Thank you so much, David. It's always nice to see you. I'm really excited about this.
Well, and I'm excited about the conversation and hearing what you're up to these days and what you're learning. And so, yeah, appreciate you joining us today.
Yes, absolutely. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, sounds good. So, Stephanie, we're talking about legacy this month. And I know that from what I know of your story, there have been people that have made a big impact on your life. And I think the definition of legacy is just leaving behind something of importance, something that's going to make an impact on people who follow you. And so maybe as we talk about impact and legacy, who have been some people in your life? And I know from reading your book, I know from listening to it, your dad had a big impact on your life, but talk about some of the people that helped build legacy and left legacy in your life.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I will always start with my father first, because so much of the life that I live now, I can trace it back to being a daddy's girl and just some of the wisdom that he imparted, onto me. So my legacy starts with my father. I was daddy's girl. He was definitely a girl dad for sure. My father has passed away since then, but some of the things that he taught me, because he was in the military, so I always say I was brought up by a soldier, right? So some of the legacy that he taught me that I still hold true to this day, David, is you got to finish what you start, right? So the mission always has to be completed. So that is a big part of my leadership style. And then also there's always 2 sides to every story. So I'd like to pride myself in whenever I'm being approached with any type of scenario, I always want to know what's the second side of the story, or what is it that I'm not seeing, right? What are the things that could go wrong? Like, to really think outside the box so that I can get a different result than what's currently being transacted right now. So anyways, my legacy is definitely my father. And
So Stephanie, that wasn't the answer I expected, to be honest with you, because my my stereotype, and it's probably wrong, and we'll get into later your book, which probably tells me I shouldn't have stereotypes. But my stereotype of somebody that would be a military dad would be kind of this regimented, hard, follow the rules kind of person, and he wasn't that way, or he was, but those aren't the main things that left behind.
Yeah, he was that way at work, and my father was really intentional. And your stereotype is very common, right?
Yeah.
And so when he got back into the house, literally the minute he took his shoes off, he no longer was the soldier. He was just dad, right? So because he had to be so regimented outside of the house, pants have to be creased, shirt has to be, wrinkle free, hair is in place, everything's just precision. That when he got home, he literally kind of let his hair down, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And that was great for me as a child, especially as the youngest child, because I don't know that all that stiffness would have worked for me anyway. I probably would have rebelled against it.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have that, and I really had a dad that was, just all encompassing, it was really fantastic for me as a childhood. But yeah, he had two sides, trust me.
Yeah.
I just didn't have to deal with that second side.
That's good, yeah. So a big part of your career was in the aviation business. And if I remember right your story, you got started fairly young in the aviation world, and even some of the people there in your first jobs really left a legacy in your life as far as guiding you towards staying in the aviation world. So describe some of that. How did you get started in aviation?
Yeah, so how I got started, well, starting back to being an Air Force brat, right? So I was always around planes, hearing them take off and land my entire life. And so those were not private jets, of course. They were fighter jets that I heard a lot about, but jets are jets. And so I just was really intrigued with the whole thing. So early on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So yes, I got into aviation really young because I didn't go to college. I went to a trade school, knocked out a year in travel and hospitality. But because I knew what I wanted to do, I just didn't feel like spending the 4 years in college made sense because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. So therefore, my very first job in aviation, I was 18 years old, right? Now, fast forward, I always say I'm a 40-year success story, overnight success story, right? But that's really how I got into aviation. And from there, one of the people that really was pivotal for me, and here's what's really interesting, David. I only had one conversation with this particular gentleman, but you've heard me speak and on the power of a conversation. So one gentleman, his name was Jim, and he's the one who told me, hey, I think we have you in the wrong position. This is when I worked for the airlines and I was a baggage handler. He said, I think your personality, you should be in sales. And so then I got moved into sales, and then the rest is history in my career. So he was one person that actually had an impact. And then I would say my second person is I had a boss, my very first sales boss. She was a few years older than me, so we were both really young. She was a horrible boss. Like when I really think back at it, she wasn't a good leader, a developer of leaders. That wasn't who she was. But I learned a lot from her because she was the type of boss that she cut nobody no slack. So either you hit the number, or you didn't hit the number. If you didn't hit it, you were out, right? And that was her leadership style. But I'm grateful for her because I learned, couple that with my father, you got to always complete the mission. I learned that, the job is the job and you have to get it done. No matter what the situation is, the mission has to be completed. So whether that's a sales number or developing leaders or hitting a goal or going into a new market, whatever, you got to get it done. And so I think life is super simple when you kind of walk on that philosophy that no matter what, the mission has to be completed.
That's good. So go back to your start in aviation. You said you were a baggage handler. So at what point did leadership start coming into your life? Because when you say baggage handler, describe what that means. And did that entail leadership, or when did you start even moving in towards the leadership direction in your life?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is, thank you for asking that question. No one's actually asked me define the baggage handler role, because I think every single one of us that are on a plane, we see the people on the ramp, right? When the plane is pushing back, you see them standing there with the flashlight. You probably don't see them, actually bringing the flight in because the pilots are seeing that. But there is a lot of dynamics happening on the ramp. Can I tell you, David, that was one of my favorite jobs.
Is that right?
Literally one of my favorite jobs. If I could get paid the money that I need to make nowadays, I'd still be working out there. Yeah. And the reason why is that's the pulse of what's going on in an airline. When you think of an airport, it's a small city, right?
Yeah.
But the pulse of what's happening is happening on the ramp. And so there, by default, you actually have to start using leadership skills during that time. I got to figure out, where does these bags go, right? You don't just throw bags on the plane. There's a whole weight and balance that needs to be figured out. So that's leadership. You got to figure out, okay, this plane's, delayed. And so now we've got to move the jetway and move the gate and, make all those 100 people go from one area to another area. There is a lot of leadership happening on the ramp. And I don't think people actually realize that. And you've got, $100 million aircraft, $60 million aircraft. You've got to make sure it doesn't, as you're pushing it back, it doesn't hit the wing of something else. There's a lot of dynamics going on. So that, believe it or not, actually was every single day, every single moment you're having to make leadership decisions, because literally there's lives at stake.
So go back to the conversation you had with your one supervisor who said, we've got you in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. Was there something that he saw in you then in that moment? Was there an incident or something that caused him to say that? And then where did that take you after that conversation?
So he was the head of sales, and he didn't work at the airport. He just traveled through the airport a lot because it was a really big.
You were in Boston, right? Is that where you?
And I was in Boston. Yep. So I was a Boston. I was a really big. That my particular airline that I was working for at the time had a really big presence in the city of Boston. So a lot of the executives would fly in and out of the city for meetings, and he just happened to be a person that I would see him. I knew who he was. I didn't know he knew who I was. I'd never talked to him before, right?
Yeah.
So, but what he saw specifically, based on what he told me that day, was he said, Steph, every time I come to this airport, I see you. I see you checking customers in with a smile on your face. I think you should be in sales. I think we have you in the wrong position. And so he saw that. Now, it's really interesting, David, because now as I'm having this conversation, there was another leader that I had when I was in the private jet sector, so many, many years later, and he watched me at an event. And again, I didn't know this gentleman. I'd never had a conversation with him. Later on that week, when I was introduced to him, he was, it was a big company. He was the CEO. And so he said to me, he goes, Stephanie Chung. He says, he goes, I've heard really good things about you. And of course, I'm like, they're all true, right? But he actually was a person who told HR, I want her to oversee this. And he made me, move and all that stuff. Again, I've never had a conversation with him. But what he was observing at that particular show, I'll never forget. And he told me this because I was thrilled that he saw this in me, but I wanted to know how and why and like more details. And one of the things he says is, when we were at that show, there was 500 of us employees working this particular show. It was a big show. And that's where it's the show that everybody's selling planes that day, right? So he said, you were a VP, just like all the other VPs, but you were the only VP working. All the other ones left it to the assistants and the managers, and they are all running around sweating, trying to make everything work. He said all the other VPs were sitting around talking to each other. And you were the only one, rolled up your sleeves in there, asking the assistants, hey, how can I help? What do you guys need? He goes, and I watched you. And he said, and I thought to myself, all these other guys, they're slugs, they're sitting there. But she's actually rolling up her sleeves and doing the work.
That's cool.
And do you know, he gave me my first real executive position and gave me the whole department, cleared out the other guy. It's like, okay, this dog can report to her. And that started my journey on becoming a president and then a C-suite executive and so on and so forth.
That's great. Interesting to see that people are always watching us, whether we realize it or not, and what a difference that makes. Yeah. And real cool. So have you continued that kind of mindset or practice that you just roll up your sleeves and jump into whatever's going on?
Yes, actually. And sometimes it doesn't serve me well, right? because sometimes you're sitting there and you're thinking, this could be done such a different way or better way. And it can show up in the weirdest places, David. I may be at, just standing in line at a restaurant or something and watching how inefficient this whole thing is, right? So sometimes it's a blessing and a curse, but yes, it has been instilled in me. And I go back to the military background with that, right? Okay. Because there's cause and effect. Everything has order, right? You can't have dysfunction on a base. And I lived on active Air Force bases, so you couldn't just roll onto the base. You had to go past the soldiers with the machine guns and the armored vehicle, just because of what my dad did. So everything had order. But the flip side of that, David, is as us kids, teenagers growing up on active Air Force bases, if we got in trouble, let's say I got in trouble for speeding on the base, the commander's not calling me in, he's calling my father in. And now he has to be accountable for what's happening in his household, right?
Yeah.
So everything was cause and effect. So I see leadership the same way. When I, lead a team, develop a team, that team represents me as much as I represent it.
Exactly.
And so that's the first message I always say to every team that I take over, which is, you are your brother's keeper on this team. We're going to all win together, we're going to all lose together, but we will do this together. We're one team. There's no superheroes on this one team,
Good.
And that just instills in people that you have to be paying attention, and just know that when you do something, you should do it with excellence, because you represent not just yourself, but everybody else as well.
That's great. Yeah, that's great. So Stephanie, you went from baggage handler, somebody said you ought to be in sales, so you went into sales. And so I'm going to show you all my stereotypes today. What you just described is not what I always picture somebody in sales being good at. They're good salespeople, but maybe in my experience, not always good detail people.
Yeah.
So what was your first sales experience like? And then how did that propel you towards an executive leadership position?
Yeah. So my first, you know what? And it's funny. That's a decent stereotype, right? Again, a common stereotype, because salespeople are just like, let's go, right? Yeah. But it's really interesting. What I would say for salespeople in general, and this is true for myself as well, I'm detailed in the things that will get me the result. Right. So I'm not detailed in general. I'm only detailed because I'm focused on a result. Right.
So that means you do have the capacity to be detailed. It's just in certain things, or things you're
Exactly.
more interested in. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. If I'm not interested, I'm like the Wild West, right? So that's my own inherent flaw. But what I would say is, in regards to, your question about the details, absolutely detailed in the areas that are going to be making an impact. But the other areas, I will leave the details to somebody else. And I think that can be a really good thing from a leadership perspective, right? Because when I'm leading folks, I let them run till apprehended. I don't really care how you get there, just get there, right? Yeah. And so I think most people, if they're led that way, then it's really cool, because you get to watch them figure out for themselves their gifts and their talents, and to pull out, those things that are going to help them be successful. As leaders, we have a job to do to try to be paying attention to what are their gifts and talents, right, and put the right people in the right place. But it's really cool when they also have to figure out the gifts and talents. And so, it's interesting, because I mentor a CEO, and I just had a conversation with her last night. She's having a frustrating day with some of her folks, and the process and procedures and whatnot. And what I always encourage leaders is, don't make this complicated. Right? Set the vision, be really clear about what the vision is, make sure that you're standing there as a backup for them, but let them do what they do, right? It doesn't matter how they get there. And I think sometimes, especially with so many generations working, and I know we're going to talk about the book later, that's one of the biggest challenges that leaders, especially leaders like us, David, of a certain age, we are struggling with this, right? Because we really want those generations to do it our way, right?
Exactly. That's good. That's good. So obviously you excelled at sales. So you were noticed, and you moved into more of an executive leadership position. Was that a hard transition for you, or was that fairly natural? And has each step been a fairly natural progression for you?
Well, it's actually my very first sales job. I struggled because I had to learn how to sell, and I wasn't getting it. And again, I had my very first sales leader was not that leader that was going to develop me to get it. She just wanted me to get to the number, right? So that's kind of forced me into sales details, right? Because I had to figure out, how do you position this? How do you open? How do you close? How do you add support? How do you overcome the objection? Like, sales is a lot of details, believe it or not. When you're formally trained, it's not about just talking. Those are the worst kind of salespeople. It really is a very strategic move. It's more of a mental thing than anything else. So I had to learn the details, and so to be successful at sales. Fast forward to answer your question, as a sales leader, yes, those same details came into play, but also to kind of lean back and realize that how I do things, it's one way to do it. It's not the only way to do it, right? And so where it helped me as a leader to really start getting into details and focus more into details is because now as a sales leader, you've got a big quota. It's one thing to have my own quota. It's another thing to have everybody's quota, David, right? And I've chopped it up into bite-sized pieces for them to get it done. But at the end of the day, I'm still the person who's going to have to answer for this particular number. So yes, the details now are still details, but they shifted into a different direction, right? I'm incredibly grateful. I'm going to go on a rant for a second, David. Right now, there's a lot of conversation. A lot of conversation. I'm getting calls by the press. What Stephanie's feeling on this? We want a quote for this about returning back to the office.
Hey, everybody, it's Eric. I'm the content producer of the Global Leadership Podcast. Really hope you're enjoying this conversation between David Ashcraft and Stephanie Chung. And I wanted to let you know you can hear a whole lot more of Stephanie at the upcoming 2025 Global Leadership Summit, as well as other experts in their fields. They're going to build into you and infuse you with insights just like the ones that you're learning today. And listen, we don't want you to sleep on this. We don't want you to miss. Our super early bird rate ends on May 7th. What that means is that right now you can get the lowest rate for a summit ticket, up to $60 off. That means you can go and attend one of your local host sites where you can meet other community leaders inside your area. Or if that's not something that you can actually get to, we want to continue to serve you without barriers, so you can also join us online. Just don't miss the super early bird deadline that's coming up on May 7th. With that, let's get back to our episode.
And here's my take, and I hope nobody hates me when I'm done with this, right? But when you think of being a sales leader, as sales leaders, most VPs of sales have never led a team that was in the office.
Right, that's true.
The teams are always remote, right? And yet, as an organization, every company, your salespeople are the ones who are driving the most revenue because that's their job. You give them the most trust and leadway. You don't know what they're doing every day. They're not in the office, right? Yeah. And yet you're expecting big things. You're expecting that whole top line to come from people who are not in the office, right? And so I think that we as leaders, sales leaders are not the ones complaining like everybody needs to be back in the office. Everybody else is complaining about it. But I'm going to challenge leaders to maybe there's a different way to lead, right? When I was a sales leader, I worked for a huge company. My team was always number one in employee engagement, and they were not in the office. So what that meant is I had to learn how to lead. I had to step up and level up and lead this team that wasn't, they were all remote. My whole career was remote people, right? Or not my whole career, but my whole sales career. And so I just want to challenge leaders to really, really think about that. I guess you feel like you can see them and they're going to be more productive, but I want to challenge that all day, 10 ways till Sunday. I think we bought a little bit into the hype, and I don't believe that that's true.
So that's real interesting you bring that up. Because of COVID, the GLN, our staff, for the most part, I would say 60% are remote, maybe 40% local. And just had this conversation with our board last week of do we need to pull people back in, which was interesting because the phrase was used, bring them back in. I was like, well, most of them have never been in at all. And so bringing them back in it's not even ever been a reality. But it's that challenge. And I think from a leader standpoint, if I can at least see you and you're in the office, at least I know you're here and you're not off doing other things. So that's a real tension point as you go down that road. I know for me early on as a leader, one of the first staff people we hired, he wasn't good at 8 to 5. He was great at producing for what we needed on the weekend. And so I had a board member come and say, well, he's never here 8 to 5. What are we doing? I said, well, did we hire him to be here and sit in his office from 8 to 5, or did we hire him to produce and do good on the weekend?
Yes.
And so,
good for you, David. Yes, it's a challenge. And so and that's where with all these generations at work, this is the number one thing, and obviously I speak in different industries. I speak to different leaders from different industries. This is the thing that's keeping people up at night as to whether they should return to the office or not. So I love, kudos to you for having that openness to think, well, maybe there's a different way. At the end of the day, it's just about, can they get the job done, right? How they get there, I don't care. Just get the job done,
Well, Stephanie, this is a rabbit trail, but I like this rabbit trail. So how do you get past then? The rub is we're paying you for 40 or 45 hours a week, but really we're not. We're paying you to get the job done, but we assume it's going to take 40 or 45 or 50 hours a week. And so knowing that you're giving me the 40 or 45 or 50 hours a week that I think I'm paying you for somehow makes me feel better. And so how do you get past I'm paying you for this just that tension. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely know what you're saying. And I like this rabbit trail too. We're having real talk, David.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I would say, and you actually said it. We're not really paying them for 40 hours a week. We're just paying them to get the job done, whatever that job is, based on their roles and responsibilities. That's what we're paying for. So whether it takes them 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, or 15 hours a week, right? We're really paying for the job itself to be done, not the time it takes you to do it, right? Now, we all know, just life experience, there are times that some projects are going to take you the full 40 hours. Some are going to take you 35 hours. Some are going to take you 65 hours, right? So, let's flip it and reverse it. When they're working on, just gazillions of hours trying to get this particular task done, you don't hear leaders complaining at that point, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. When you said it could be done in 30, 15, or 60, it doesn't really bother me that it takes you 60. Then I feel like, I'm getting extra value.
Right.
If you can do it in 30 or 15, I'm like, I'm getting cheated. So it's funny how it plays in your mind. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think this is why I'm jazzed about the season that we're in as leaders. Because this is, I was just explaining this to the CEO that was having a hard time the other day. I go, there's two paths we get ready to take. You can either go this way or this way. Most leaders are going to go this way. It's easier. It's how we've always done it, blah, 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 blah. But the ones who have the courage, David, to go this way, it's a whole new time right now. And they're the ones that, legacies will be discussed with the ones who go this way. Because they're going to do things differently, and therefore they're going to get a different result with a group of people who are all very, very different. So I'm excited about it.
That's great. All right, so let's turn the corner a little bit here, Stephanie. You always were in the aviation industry, is that correct?
Correct.
And you've been in all seats, from baggage handler to sales to the top position. And so in the midst of all that, you've had to work with a lot of varieties of types of people. And I've already thrown out several stereotypes, which is probably what you work against. But you've written a book of how to lead people that are different than you, and have this idea of ally leadership. And so talk a little bit about your experiences with working with different types of people, and then talk about maybe what even caused you to write the book, what initiated that. And it's an excellent book, by the way. Let me just say that too. So. Thank
you, David. You've been such a godsend for me with this book. So it was writing a book's not easy. So, but thank God, we got it done, and I'm super proud of the work, and just how people are resonating with the book makes me really happy. But to go back to your question in regards to my coming up in aviation. So I started off in the airlines, and then I moved to private aviation. And why that's important is the airlines are much bigger, obviously, than private aviation. Both are huge industries, but airlines are bigger. So therefore, they're a little bit more advanced in some of the challenges that private aviation is still trying to work through, if you will. So I came from an industry, especially when I got into the private side, that, I always make a joke about it. You've heard me say this joke before, that the industry was really all about men, because most people in private aviation, or they're pilots or whatever, they come from a military background, right? So one, it leans really heavy on a male-dominated space. That's first thing. Second thing, private, if you're flying, if you want to be a pilot, it's a very expensive hobby. And so therefore, it's just, there's not a whole lot of diversity in aviation. We're all working on it. We are all working on trying to get this in a different position. But when I was coming up, 30, 40 years ago, it was what it was. And so therefore, I was very much, a unicorn, right? Being a woman in a male-dominated space, being a person of color. It was just, I was truly the one, right? And only. And so thank God, I had my military upbringing, which is you complete the mission. Don't get focused on all the noise, just complete the mission, right? So that really helped me a ton. And yes, I had at different seasons, some different opposition. And fortunately, I'm, that girl that can dig in, and my calf muscles are super strong. So I'm not really movable because unless the mission's been completed, I'm focused, right? So all of that served me well. It really did. When I got into different positions where I could then start to make an impact, because here's what I know for sure, and all the research, anybody can Google any of the research, and the research will back me up 10 ways till Sunday, that the more you can have as far as variations on your team, the better the team is. And so therefore, for me, I was always focused on how do I get the best talent, because we want to get this mission accomplished, but the easiest way possible, right? Not every struggle needs to be hard, right? So how do we do this in a way that's going to be fast and easy and we can have some fun in the process? And so what I have found is when you have people at the table or in the room or, in the discussion that have a different communication style, different upbringing, different perspective, different race, different gender, different age, like just difference. That is when you're able to really have the best of the best at the table. And so I've seen that. I've been a part of that. I believe that. I've lived that. And therefore, that's what encouraged me to write the book about it, because I don't think leadership has to be as hard as we make it. And the book is really like, hey, here's how I, maneuvered through this whole thing and was able to get to the highest level, having literally nothing or no one to be able to kind of mimic and emulate.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, right? And yet I still got there.
Which is interesting, Stephanie, because you've been kind of first in a lot of things. So you were the first Black female person to lead a major aviation company. There's a lot of first. So did you ever know or even think about you were first as you were going through it, or it just kind of happened and then you look back and go, oh, I was first?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. So when I became the first Black person to lead a private aviation company, I didn't actually know that I was the first, right? And so when the position was appointed to me, it was the PR people that actually did the research, and they're like, oh my God, she's the first, right? So, and so therefore, and I remember this so vividly, David, because when this all happened the same day. My announcement was made, the team was now told, the press had, started to hit and pick up, and that's when we discovered, she's the first, and so now that made a different set of news. And I remember talking to my CEO at the time, who was a white gentleman, and he, to his credit, he came over to me and he said, he goes, a lot of the press is really hyping on the fact that you're the first Black person in U.S. history, and that's not why I hired you. And so he was feeling he didn't know how he felt about it, and he wanted to know how I felt about it, because he didn't want the press to paint it as, oh, well, she got this because of that. He's I didn't even know, she got it because she was the best person for the job. And so we had a really good discussion about it. And I remember saying to him, I'm okay with the press doing that because it's not about me at this point. They're actually hyping it up because it's all about all the other kids that may look like me or look like not like you know what I mean? That gives them hope and gives them like, hey, if she could do it, I could do it. And doors. So that was why I leaned into it and why I still lean into it. Because there's still room at the top for everybody. Yeah. But as a little girl growing up, as a military kid, wanting to be in aviation, I had never seen a person of color depicted in TV, film, or magazine as a aviator. And so I never saw it, right? So now to then be the first one in that particular private aviation space where now other little kids could see it, is why I still lean into it and still use my voice to help as much as I can. Yeah, because it's never been about me. It really is about just everybody else coming up after.
That's real good. So let's talk about content of the book and where you kind of go with the book. And the title, or maybe the subtitle, is How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. And so, Stephanie, this is a conversation that has probably needed to go on for a while. I would say, based on just society as it is now, it's probably harder to talk about this than ever before. At least that's my experience. Mm-hmm. And you started off by making comments of we are better, and you stayed away from the D word, the diversity, but we're better when there are people around us that are different than us, if they've got the skill set necessary to do what you're doing. And so it could be real easy to go, this is a book about diversity, and I'm staying away from that because it's almost become a negative thing. Yeah. I like the title because it says how to lead people who are not like you. The implication is they're already there. And it's throw out the word diversity. It doesn't matter a lot of those details. We're all working, no matter what the context, with people that are not like us.
Yes.
Because there's nobody else that's like me. And so we can try to surround ourselves with people that are similar to us, but they're all going to be different. So this applies in any setting.
Yes.
And I love the fact, again, you say it's around us. The people are around us, whether we want to or not. And so how do I deal with them? Is that correct?
That's correct, and thank you for that, because I really am very intentional. It's unfortunate that there's certain words that are actually really positive words that have become negative triggers,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Privilege is another one of those words, right? Privilege is actually a positive word, so yet it's become a real big trigger for people. Diversity is another one, and so yes, I did not want the book to be put into a box, because that's not the case. The case right now and point is really simple. We've got 6 generations at work. That's never happened in our history, right? So the average age is anywhere from 16 to 75 years old. So that alone is a challenge, because we know that boomers think very different than, let's say, Gen Z, the Zoomers, and everybody in between. So 6 generations at work. We have women are the majority of the population. So women think differently, we communicate differently, we see things differently. So that changes the dynamic in the workplace. We have every single ethnic group growing and the non-ethnic group shrinking. It's been shrinking for the past decade, right? That changes the dynamics. And then we have people with neurodiversities, we have, different able-bodied folks. We have just a lot going on in the workplace. And so because of that, we as leaders are going to be, we're leading people who are not like each other, and they're not like us. And so what we talk about a lot of times is diverse teams, and we talk about all the positives, and we should not ever be having a conversation again about whether a diverse team is good or not. It's just good business, period. Yeah. And again, don't take my word, Google it, right? Go Google all the facts. And so therefore, if you're a leader, you've got a fiscal responsibility to your board, your shareholders, your employees, your customers, whatever. Even a nonprofit has to bring in profit, right? So as leaders in any company, we have to make sure that we set the company up to win. And how you win, based on the research, is to have more differences at the table than not. That's how you set the company up to win. And if the company wins, then the employees and everybody else who's part of the company wins as well. So I want everybody to realize that this is the new form of leadership in the 21st century. It's not a black, white, gay, straight, male, female issue. It's just everybody that's on my team is not going to be like me. There's no way they can be. It's the reality. And so now the real leaders, the ones who go either this way or that way, are realizing that, you know what, I'm not going to try to fight this, because you're going to lose, right? Yeah. And you'll be left behind and the train's still leaving, right? The train has left the track. Yeah. So now it's a matter of, well, how do I become a really great leader that leaves a legacy that can actually be a leader that people want to emulate? And how you do that is you meet people where they are. And that means if they're not like you, which is most likely the case, then you're going to have to figure out, how do I communicate with people that are not like me? That's the biggest challenge. The reason why people give resistance is because that's the challenge. They don't want to have to change. They feel like, you know what, actually, I've gotten pretty far and things have been working well for me. And so why do I need to change? Because the world's changing, right? Yeah. And so that's why you have to change. If you want a different result, you're going to have to do things differently. And that's really what the book is all about. So you've read the book. You were thankfully one of my beta readers. And so you've added some really good input and insight. But I hold no bars with this book. I'm coming in hot, as we say in aviation, right? Because I just really believe that true leadership, we have an epidemic as far as leadership is concerned. And so people who really want to, they feel like they've been given a gift of leadership. They really want to do it well. They want to serve well. They feel like, I personally feel like one day I'm going to be accountable to how I led. I feel like I am super grateful for the people I've ever led, but I also see them as they are God's prized possession. Right? He's given us his greatest asset, which is people. And so I have a responsibility as a leader to help and not hurt them. And I can do that with my mouth, right? Not knowingly, or I don't want to change, or this is how we do things, like all that stuff. None of that stuff applies anymore. It's a new world. And so I will tell you, my purpose in life right now is to help leaders get that, and to then figure out, okay, now how do I level up?
That's good.
That's the part of the book.
So Stephanie, as we get ready to close, I want to ask you a question, and then I want to make a couple of comments before you answer. But is there an example of somebody, because one of the things I love about the book is you give lots of examples of somebody that is different than you. and then you say, here's how you dealt with them, or how is maybe a good way to deal with them. So I'd love to have you give an example with that. But can I just say what I appreciate about the book? One, you make the statement that having different people on the team is definitely a great way to go, but you don't spend time in the book telling us we have to go that way. And what you also just set up, though, is it's a reality, whether we want it to be different or not. It is that way. So you don't spend a lot of time saying make it diverse. You just say we live and we work in a diverse culture. And so how do I lead people in that setting? And you do come in hot in the book. And I know you and I talked when I read through it first, and there were certain times where, boy, you'd get me just on the edge of almost being mad. And then all of a sudden you'd go, but it's not about a political side. It's not right or left. It's just the reality. These people are in my business, in my company, my customers. So how do I lead them? And so it's a balanced book. And so I guess the reason why I say that is I don't want anybody to get turned off of saying, oh, this is about diversity and I don't want to hear about it. It's not about diversity. It's about the fact that we are in a diverse culture. So how do you lead in the midst of that? And so appreciate that very much in the way you write the book. And it's a book that will it will initiate feelings as you read through it. Because you'll describe different settings, and I'm like, oh my goodness, well, I would never be in that setting, but I will be, because it's not a choice. That's just the way it is. So all that to say, I think it's a great book for people to read. It will challenge, it will stir emotions, but I think it's an excellent book, and so great job on that. That said, can you give an example of maybe one person or one situation where you were just extremely challenged, but you still had to lead them because they're on your team. You didn't choose them; they're just there. And so now, how do you lead them?
So there, it's funny, and actually, I would love to get your opinion on this too, David, because you've read the book, and you're right; it's full of stories. And I tell people the stories of the times I hit it out the park and the times I failed miserably, right? And one of the stories that that I'm going to talk about, but I also would love to hear your take on one of your favorite stories in there, and we can kind of co-create this narrative together. But I tell a story about Melissa. And Melissa was somebody on my team this is something leaders never talk about, but we need to have this discussion. A lot of times employees talk about their leaders, whether it's on social media or to each other, and how much they don't like the leader or whatever. And leaders never get an outlet to be able to talk about, there's somebody on my team, I don't actually like them either, right? Right? We never get to have that conversation. Right. So again, I'm coming in hot with this book. I talk about a person, and I named her Melissa to protect the innocent, that she was on my team, and she drove me crazy, just drove me crazy. We were so opposite, and I didn't like her. At the end of the day, I just didn't like her because I felt like everything about her was dramatic. Like it was always something, and so it started to grind on me a little bit. But what I realized is, hey, I hired her, and therefore I have a responsibility to figure out how to get along with her. She and I are not alike. We got nothing in common for the most part, but she's still here, and it would be easy for me to just. She's not a cultural fit, you know what I mean? Right. And just toss her off to the side. And we leaders know how we can do that, right? And so it would have been easy for me to do that. But that's not what really elite leaders do, right? We complete the mission. The mission is she needs to be successful on this team just like everybody else. And my job is to help her get there. So that meant that I needed to kind of deal with my own feelings. What is it that I don't like about her? Why don't I like her? What is, what's my issues first? And then I went and met with her. I flew down to spend some time with her just one-on-one, because what I found is I would avoid her a lot of times. I would just not do one-on-ones with her. I'd do one-on-ones with everybody else, but when it was her time, it was like, I just can't handle the drama today, right? So I made myself, I decided I'm going to, do everything I possibly can to help her win on this team. That first means I have to figure out what winning means to her, like what makes her winnable. And then the book, we talked about the name of the book, Ally Leadership, How to Lead People Who Are Not Like You. But the word ally is an acronym, and it stands for Ask, Listen, Learn, You Take Action. So that's how I applied it to Melissa. So I flew down, had lunch with her, got to talk to her a little bit, and really started, I didn't want to have her come to my office, and I didn't want to go to her office. I needed a neutral place. So I could get to know her, because at the end of the day, she's still a person. She's somebody's daughter, somebody's best friend, somebody's, wife. She's still a person, and she deserves my respect. And so by spending time with her, what I found out after eating through our salad is her mother had died unexpectedly in a car crash when she was 13. She was raised by a father who was very, very strict. He'd come from, from a different culture. And so he just was very rigid in his rules. And then she had two rambunctious brothers. So she's the only girl in the house. And so how she grew up was watching reality TV. So when I would see her as always bringing the drama, well, that's really who raised her. Yeah. So she was raised how to dress a certain way, how not to handle her feelings, how to not look introspectively, but to kind of cast out blame all over the place. When we think of reality TV and all that it is, that's who raised her. And so now as an adult, that's what I'm dealing with, right? And so by understanding that, I now saw her as a person who just really had a really tough childhood. Losing your mom unexpectedly at 13 years old is tough for anybody. Yeah. And so now I took on this new role of trying to do what I could to help her understand how to maneuver, especially in a male-dominated industry. Yeah. And she was a beautiful girl, right? So I now, instead of her getting, driving me crazy, she now became not my project, but my project on how can I actually help her win. Yeah, and so it changed my entire attitude about her and how I led. And so because at that moment I could either go this way or I could go that way. And I chose to go that way. And I'm still in contact with her now and super, super proud of all the things that she's been able to get accomplished.
I love that. I think that's a great example, Stephanie. And what I appreciate about you have, obviously you've studied all this, but more than study it, you've lived it and you've had to work with people that are different than you, like Melissa. And so way to go for doing well and learning how to lead people that are not like you. Way to go for writing the book. Excited for you to be at the summit this year. So you're going to be one of our speakers at the 2025 summit. And so excited to have you speaking and joining us, and just appreciate you as a person. One of the comments you made and when you were talking about Melissa is you just had to see her as a person. And so as a person of faith, then I go, okay, a person that actually was made in the image of God, whether it's a different image than what I might want to be, it's still made in the image of God, still very valuable to God. And that's really all you're doing is you're living that out. And so way to go for that. Yes. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And when we're together at GLS, I really do believe this is the calling and the season that I'm in, and just getting people to not overcomplicate it. Leadership is hard enough. Life is hard enough. And if we would truly just see everybody, like think about this, David, it is in its simplest form. This is it. If we just saw everybody as God's creation and treated them as such, that's all I'm literally trying to convey to people.
That's cool.
So instead of taking the Bible and slapping people over the head with it, let's pick it up and read it, right? And then just do that, right? Yeah. Treat them like God's creation.
Yeah, very cool. Stephanie, thank you for the time today, and very much looking forward to being with you in August, and appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you for having me. Best call of the day.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I told you, listening to Stephanie is like an infusion of energy. And not only just that, but she has done the research and is giving us key insights into what it looks like to actually build teams that will be successful in 2025. I don't know about you, but I took some notes in what she was saying. I made sure to write down this. The most differences at the table will help the company win. And when the company wins, the employees win. That means I am already thinking about who is at my table. Do we have people that are coming at the table with different perspectives, different backgrounds, so that we can end up with the best outcomes? And then I'm also thinking about our organization. And not only that, but who am I listening to? And am I making sure as a leader, I am hearing from people that have diverse backgrounds than myself? And listen, that's exactly the kind of leadership insights that you're going to get at the Global Leadership Summit on August 7th and 8th. And you heard it earlier in this episode. Our super early bird price ends on May 7th. So make sure to go and grab your tickets at globalleadership.org/summit to make sure you get your $60 off your ticket. Thanks so much for joining us inside of this podcast community. And just remember that everyone has influence, so lead where you are.